Coming up on McKnight tonight, while many are praising Barnaby Joyce for his openness about prostate cancer, I'll reveal why I have a major issue with his timing. Rail unions are taking the piss, demanding driver cabins on driverless trains, and they might just get what they want. Radio legend John Stanley will be my special guest. And do you know what the interrobang is? How a little unknown symbol could change your life. And I really mean this.
McKnight tonight. McKnight tonight.
Wrong again.
McKnight tonight. McKnight tonight.
I've seen that since university.
Fun, insightful interviews. Football watch, McKnight tonight. McKnight tonight. McKnight tonight. Here comes McKnight tonight.
Hello, I'm Rob McKnight and welcome to Season 2 of McKnight Tonight. Well, you know, not much has happened since our last episode, has it? We have a new Pope, Australia has ousted two political leaders, Peter Dutton and Adam Bandt, and it's weird how many people seem to be happy to see the back of Bandt. I'm going to be honest, including myself. Now, despite his own defeat, he was still trying to take credit for keeping the Libs out of government. I mean, it had nothing to do with Labor. Is this bloke seriously deluded? Well, I do have my own opinions on that. Let me know what you think. Hey, did you know today is International Day of Plant Health? It's a shame we're not on tomorrow, though, because it's World Belly Dance Day tomorrow, and I could have been tempted to get out the old belly and do a bit of a dance. My family are very thankful it's not World Belly Dance Day, and I bet you are too. Anyway, lots ahead today, but let's get into our first topic. And Barnaby Joyce has been making headlines this week after opening up about his health.
Barnaby, you have revealed some news you've kept secret during the campaign, that you have been diagnosed with prostate cancer and will have an operation today. How are you?
Well, I feel fine, and I suppose that's the problem with prostate cancer. You don't feel bad. You go to the toilet a bit more than you should. I was very lucky. The Dr. Miriam Grakowski has insisted I get a PSA test, and she used to ring me up when I was on the road and say, why haven't you got that test? And I went and got it and said, well, bingo, it's elevated levels. So then you get an MRI and they check that and they say, yeah, there's something there. And then you get a biopsy and they say, yep, it's cancer, but you're lucky. It's early, it's early stages, but you've got to do something about it. So I waited till obviously after the election. I didn't want a big circus going on during the election, which inevitably would happen. And literally straight after this program, I'm going in the car and I've actually got a flat tyre. Can't help myself, can I? I've got a flat tyre in the truck, so I fix that up. Then I'm going straight down the road and straight into surgery.
Yeah, look, Joyce has been praised. He's been widely praised for bringing attention to the subject of prostate cancer, but I couldn't help find the timing of his public statements suspicious. And look, when you look at that footage there, he does look a bit beaten down. So, this is a serious health issue. He's going to be fine. He's found it early enough. So we're not talking here about his actual health, but he has known about this for some time, but he chose 2 days after the election to go public. There was no mention of it during the campaign. Now, here's my question. Don't voters deserve to know if there are any health issues for the person they're voting for? Now, again, this isn't ultimately going to be a major issue, even though prostate cancer can be. He's found it soon enough. They're going to go in there and do the surgery. He's going to be fine by all accounts. But I just don't buy into this idea that politicians have a right to privacy in these terms. We vote for them based on their perceived values, and we should know if they're facing any health issues. Now, I posted my thoughts about this week on Facebook, saying, am I the only person who has a problem with Barnaby Joyce not declaring his health issues before the election? And I have to tell you, it looks like I'm in the minority, judging by the responses. Lindsay Hughes says, they say timing is everything. And indeed it is, Lindsay, and that's my point. He's not going to die. But don't the voters deserve to know if there are some health issues, especially with aging politicians? More people responded. Sarah Patterson said, no matter what you think of the bloke, he is going through a lot at the moment, very personal and private, but he's chosen to make it public to help others get tested. He could have chosen not to disclose it at all. Very true, Sarah, but I think he should have disclosed it, and that's the point. Doug Brown says, I'm of the opinion person's health is a personal and private matter that doesn't need to be shared by them, even people with a high public profile. Dee Madigan, who you'd know from the Gruen transfer, she actually makes a lot of campaign ads for Labor. Even she disagreed with me. She said, I reckon he has a right to privacy about his health. Rob Irwin says, my mind immediately goes to what's the sliding scale here? Should you disclose if you have a cold? No, that would be crazy. So let's throw that one on the end of the scale. Should you disclose if your doctor's giving you 3 months to live? Probably. So that goes up the other end. Although in that scenario, I don't think someone would be standing at all. My point being, what's the tipping point? When is one condition okay to keep private and one is not? Who decides that? I'm glad you asked, Rob. Judge Rob is here. McKnight will decide it. Here's the thing. I think, yeah, you're right about a cold, but why not acknowledge a cold? You know, I mean, we have a prime minister who couldn't even admit he fell off a stage. And this is the problem, right? We can't trust anything they say. I think getting surgery for prostate cancer is a big deal. And I think the electorate needed to know, because it would make them think he's probably going to be fine, and he can make that point. But gee, am I voting for someone who's going to be my elected representative still in 3 years' time, or is something going to happen? Again, no one expects Barnaby Joyce to die in the next 3 years. But don't we have the right to know if there are issues that could preclude him from doing that? And it's not the first time Barnaby's thought his private life should remain private. You might remember this Daily Telegraph headline, Bundle of Joyce, which divided the nation and politicians and journalists. This was when it was revealed that his former staffer, who's now his wife, Vicky Campion, was pregnant with his child. And it always, to this day, amazes me that there were journalists and politicians saying, this is his private life, it's not for media consumption. That is absolute BS. He was their champion on family values. He voted against the same-sex marriage because same-sex marriage would destroy the sanctity of marriage. And yet there he is, cheating with his staffer and having a baby, no less. But we don't have a right to know that as people who are voting for him based on his family values and the things this man stands for. See, I'm quite the opposite with you. I don't think we should know anything about celebrities. Their private lives, they go in, they make a movie, they become famous, and we intrude on their lives something shocking. But elected officials, people we are choosing to represent us, we think their private lives are off limits? I don't get that at all. If anything, more scrutiny should be put on their private lives. Affairs, health issues, we should know it all so that when we're voting for them, we know who we're really voting for.
Here comes McKnight tonight.
Well, what do you think? Let me know. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, so leave a comment in the video section. We will get to your feedback a little later. Now, if you've been watching the news lately, you'd know the tobacco wars are a very real thing. Shops are becoming victims of ram raids, gangs are pushing through illegal products, and the government is trying to stop the distribution of those products. This week, $21 million worth of illicit tobacco and vape products were seized in what they call chop shop raids in Queensland. Let me show you this report about it from 7 News.
Lifting the lid on a booming underbelly, storage sheds filled with seized contraband.
This has a street value of over $20.5 million.
More than 76,000 vapes, 3 tonnes of illicit tobacco, 19 million illegal cigarettes collected from raids and proudly paraded by the Health Minister.
Are these Chinese or I think they come from the Middle East?
Which, under law, we can't show.
What we're actually seeing here is just the tip of the iceberg of what is now being run by organised crime.
The former superintendent claims the haul is just a drop in the ocean, a flourishing black market that's driving targeted attacks. Just last week, this Brisbane tobacconist was hit 45 grand worth of product stolen.
Just in 7 minutes. They know exactly what they are doing.
To brush out competition and feed the thriving illegal trade.
It is a big problem, and our government doesn't do anything.
Last month, fines increased for those caught selling illegal tobacco. In the first week, $5 million worth were dished out.
They've got to actually close the shop down, put the offender before the courts. If they're repeat offenders, they've got to go to jail.
That man's right. It is a problem. And you know why? Because cigarettes are just too expensive. We've gotten to the point where successive governments keep putting taxes up on cigarettes. Now, of course, they're saying, and I believe it's true, the health issues, they want people to stop. The problem is we do live in a free society and a democratic society, and people have the right to smoke if they want. It's not illegal. But I'll give you an example. In Sydney, a packet of cigarettes, that's 20 cigarettes, typically costs around $40. So that is $2 a cigarette. And as you well know, and I've got a list of prices here, cigarettes, if you're buying a couple of packets or a carton, costs a lot more than that. So when people are facing a cost of living crisis and they don't want to give up their cigarettes, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to start buying it illegally. It's a legal product, but they're buying illegal versions of it or from illegal stores because they want it cheaper. I know people who do this. And so gangs want money. And so what do you think? There's a trade here. There's a business model for them to go in, ram raid shops, which we're seeing so much of, and they're stealing from these people, and then they're selling them on the black market. And it's going to keep happening. You can threaten jail. You can say, oh, bigger fines, go to jail. It's not going to stop it because there is a fortune to be made. So what's the balance? When do we say, okay, there are health issues, legitimate health issues, and there is the realistic side of things about the costs? Remember prohibition in the States when they banned alcohol? What happened? People kept drinking alcohol. They just did it behind closed doors. And, you know, I'm trying to think of that term, you know, not shanties, but basically the bars at the back, you know, behind all started taking off. It's in lots of movies. So you don't think that's going to happen here when you're spending $40 for a packet of cigarettes? The government needs to look at the balance. They can tick a box in their public service saying, well, we're helping because we're, you know, because of the health issues. But you have to be realistic. You can make them $100. But what's going to happen? The black market's just going to get bigger and bigger. So instead of looking to a tax for a simple solution, and I'll tell Donald Trump the same thing. Taxes or tariffs aren't a simple solution because they never really get to the people you want them to get to because the people go around them. That's what's happening here. People are going around the idea of paying $40 for 20 cigarettes, and I don't blame them. Now it's time for Rob's rant because I don't get enough places to rant on this show. Look, this one has to be the most blatant example of a union taking the piss I think I've ever seen. The Daily Telegraph reported this week the rail union is demanding Transport for New South Wales install drivers' cabins on driverless metro trains. Let me say that again. The rail union in New South Wales wants to install drivers' cabins on driverless metro trains. Now, the union isn't calling them driver cabins, and I'll explain that in a moment. You might be wondering, though, why a driverless train would need a cabin for a driver, which isn't needed on the metro. Very good question. When Chris Minns came to power in New South Wales, his government offered the union a wage increase of 9.5% over 3 years. They wanted a whopping 32% pay rise over 4 years. Despite a deal looking likely, a last-minute hitch led to public transport chaos, with strike actions at times across the entire Sydney network and work stoppages involving speed reductions. Ask anyone who was in Sydney, it was chaos. Now, as I mentioned, they're targeting the metro, demanding drivers' cabins, although the union isn't calling them driver cabins because even they admit there aren't any drivers. but the union has been able to get one staff member onto the metro trains for reasons which make no sense to me. In fact, I have taken this metro quite a few times, and I went up last time I rode it to up on the Northern Line, and I was sitting there, and a train staff member got on, and you know what they did? They literally, Amanda, can you go wide for a sec? They literally, this was them. They got into the train, stood there, and yep, did that for about 3 stations, then got off. That was what this staff member was doing. They certainly weren't driving, because the trains drive themselves. The whole point of this metro system was that no staff member would be needed on there. Now, the union says these cabins are needed for staff, the staff that aren't actually doing anything, telling the Telegraph, with antisocial behaviour and assaults increasing across the rail network, workers need a safe space aboard the train to ensure both their safety and the safety of passengers. So what they want is a place where they can go and just have a private spot where they can just be on their phone. It is absolutely ridiculous. This is on top of the demands for a 24% pay rise over 3 years, 10 paid sick days a year, and staff seating at metro stations as part of the bargaining on their new enterprise agreement for workers on the metro. You know, unions do a lot of good. They make sure workers don't get ripped off. They keep employers in check, looking after employees. But when unions use their power to do crap like this, it is completely taking the piss. Now, I understand the union doesn't want, or I would assume they don't want, driverless trains, because that's less work going ahead. But when there's new technology, there's always other work. You know, they had a word for the people when the Industrial Revolution first started, and people were going and destroying anything technological, any piece of machinery. They were called Luddites. That's what this union is being. They're being Luddites. Driverless trains are fantastic. This metro is fantastic. Every 4 minutes, you don't need to worry about a timetable. Every 5 to 10 minutes, you go to a train station and you get on the train and it goes. We don't need this crap from the rail union, basically just taking New South Wales taxpayers as mugs. If the government gives into this, then they're weak and deserve to be voted out. This is one of those occasions where they have to stand up to the union, and if it turns into rail chaos, so be it. Because you know what? I reckon the people of New South Wales are smart enough to know this isn't a government issue, this is a union issue. And the further the unions go with this kind of crap, the more. I can't wait for more driverless trains. Make them all driverless. Because they don't slow, when it's a driverless train, they don't slow it down. They don't strike. They just keep going and going. And you know what? It gets me to where I want to be.
It's the random life shot of the day. Where are you going today? You'll never know where you'll end up with the random life shot of the day.
And our random live shot of the day takes you to Vatican City, where a new pope has been elected. Pope Leo XIV was officially announced, 6:05 p.m. local time, as white smoke billowed from the copper and steel chimney atop the Sistine Chapel. It's lovely weather over there right now. Not that we can tell, Vatican City have taken us inside. This is the YouTube page of Vatican Media. They've taken us inside where service is taking place, but it is a sunny day and a top of 23 degrees over there right now. And we wish the new Pope all the best. A lot of people are hoping he'll bring some progress to the Catholic Church, just like his predecessor. All right, let's take a look at the feedback coming through to McKnight tonight. What have we got? JM544 says, good evening, everyone. And of course, Team Rob, Amanda and Jazz. Jasmine's my daughter, and I think she was very pleased to get a mention. Jasmine McKnight, my daughter, says, let's go season 2. Why is she putting her own Facebook messages up? Who else? Have we actually got some feedback tonight? Here we go. Jason Turner says, remember that episode of Studio 10 when Joe Hildebrand got a prostate exam live on air? Robbo had his popcorn out. Yeah, that was great. And look, what Barnaby's doing is very serious and he's raising awareness, but I have an issue with the fact that he did not disclose a health issue before the election. And it's funny, Jason, I set that whole thing up with Joe getting the live prostate exam to raise awareness, and Sarah then told him, you can get a blood test. Over the page we go. And Jimmy says, great to have McKnight tonight back. Thank you, Jimmy. Really appreciate that. Have we got anyone else there, Jasmine, coming through to McKnight tonight? It's Jason again on the Metro. If I were a Metro staffers, I would at least make an effort of walking through and checking the carriages for rubbish, graffiti, etc. Let me tell you, Jason, there is no rubbish on the Metros. They're really, really clean. They are really well presented. Everyone is just trying to get from A to B. There is no need for Metro stuff on those trains, let me tell you. All right, let's move on, because I'll turn the music down because I've got a very special treat tonight. Someone I absolutely love. He's a radio legend, and he's been in the industry for over 35 years. So I talk to John Stanley every Tuesday night on Radio 2GB and 4BC. And I always say to him, you've got to watch McKnight tonight. And he gives it a plug, but he's never actually watched it. So I thought tonight the only way to get him to watch it was to make him come on the show. Hello, John Stanley. Good evening and welcome to McKnight tonight.
Yeah, good evening to you. You caught me the other day because you started doing your show via video link on my radio show, and I looked through, I said, you're sitting up the set. Is that what it looks like? And that caught me out because you said, you haven't watched it, have you? Which, of course, I was unable to really smother, but looks very impressive, and it's great to be part of the show. Can I also say we had arranged this, I was supposed to be driving home from Wollongong. My football team played tonight in Wollongong, the Dragons, and I was going to be doing it from the car on the way home. I have had a lurgy all week. I'm just recovering from, so I decided to stay home. I've watched the football game. We lost it was a heartbreaking loss by 1 point. So I should be in the fetal position in the corner of the room, but I've dragged myself up here and I'm doing this. I'm being very stoic, actually, because when your football team loses in heartbreaking circumstances, it's very hard to pull yourself up off the floor and start talking. But here I am.
Coming to us from the bunker tonight.
I'm in the bunker here, so I hope you can see where it's a bit of a mess, but we're in the bunker and I'm set up and I hope you're coming through loud and clear. And I've been fascinated to see the way you've done the show. You've got all the feedback. You've got everything, including the McKnight Tonight Cup. How many times tonight have you said McKnight was right?
Actually, you know what? I haven't said that yet. Someone will have to text through and say McKnight was right because I always am. John, as a radio guy, you said you've got the lurgy. How does that affect you on a day-to-day basis? People get sick, they take a few days off, but when you get sick, you've really got to think about it affects your work. You can't just work from home. You literally have to be able to perform. So is it always a problem? Are you always on the lookout for colds and things like that?
Well, these days you can work from home, and if it was such that if it was such that I had something that was it flu or RSV or COVID, I'd do it from home, which we can do these days. But Thursday, I was just on the edge there, and I got through the first hour of the show, and the second hour was okay. And as we got to the last 2 hours, 4 hours, and I thought the last hour I was really battling through. So you've got to realise that if your voice is going to give out, you're not going to be doing the right thing by the listeners. So hopefully anyone who heard the last hour of our show on Thursday night, I was absolutely battling. But I did get through right to the end. But a lot of people were saying, who is this? Because your voice changes. People don't understand it, don't even know who you are.
It's funny. I sit here every night just waiting for that call in case you get sick. It never comes. It never comes.
Well, you never know. You never know. All right. I might get sick next week just to help you. You can see me I'm a radio guy. I'm trying to frame myself in the frame because I'm learning television here tonight from my bunker.
Well, you have to now because radio has changed so much. And I want to talk to you about your career because it's been phenomenal. But now video is becoming an important part of what you do with radio, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, we have, of course, we put video links up. We have cameras in the studio. So people know, for instance, they say, why can't we see you? Because if you're doing it from outside the studio, then they recognise it. But you do, and people put video links up. Radio commentary gets put up as a link. So it's not just the radio, but in the end, I think some radio stations can get themselves caught up in all of that. The core of it is the radio still. the radio, the communication, the companionship people have listening to that radio program, which remains, although I think as we go through, technological change is starting to change the nature of it quite significantly.
In what way?
Well, I think let's start off with music. When we started to get iPods and then Spotify, and then going all the way back even further when we had Walkmans, so people were able to essentially curate their own music, and so people listening to music radio had choices, and particularly with Spotify and Apple Music and the rest, that then has been a challenge for music radio. And I've always thought with talk radio that we've largely unchanged since it first started. People listened to someone talking on the radio, and then, of course, the late 60s, we started seeing talkback. But that companionship, feeling you're connected to someone, but also feeling like you're in touch with what's going on. So when you listen to the radio, if something happens, you feel like you're going to know about it, and there's someone on air who knows what they're talking about and can tell you about it. So I always felt that we were kind of immune to those changes, but then we've started to see the rise of podcasts. So people listen to podcasts, long form interviews, and then the notion that you're in touch, it's always been people driving their cars, for instance. If you're listening to music, you're listening to Spotify, you're not really in touch. And that's why they listen largely in the big cities. You listen to Ross Stevenson in Melbourne, Ben Fordham in Sydney. Before that, you had Alan Jones, and going further back, Gary O'Callaghan. You'd listen because you knew if something happened, you would hear about it and you'd know about it. That's in your car, just moving around the place. But we now know that we know what happens if something happens and it gets shown in popular culture in movies. Suddenly something dramatic happens, everyone starts looking at their phone. So the connection through social media, people are seeing stories. So you know suddenly that something's happened, and there are different ways of finding out. Whereas not many years ago, you had to, if a story was breaking, it would be radio that would break the story immediately. Television would show it in the 6 o'clock news. They didn't have those live breaks really going back a few decades. So radio's evolved in that way. And I think that's the big challenge that we have, trying to maintain that breaking news, that companionship, and giving people that sense that they're still in touch with what's going on.
It's funny, I'm a late comer to radio. I was a television guy. I absolutely love it. I love radio. So judging by what you're saying, and I think you raise a good point, what is the future of FM, the format they use? Because why do I need to go to an FM station to listen to music? You know, surely, and we see it, 3AW is number one in Melbourne, 2GB is number one in Sydney, Kyle and Jackie O in Sydney are the second biggest in breakfast, because I don't think of them as a music breakfast show.
Well, they're a talk show.
They're a talk show.
They're a talk show. They're a talk show, and he's probably the people talk about shock jocks. The idea of a shock jock is that you are saying things to shock and create headlines and to make people to draw attention to yourself. And I think if you go back, probably in our business, I don't know whether John Laws is ever really a shock jock. Stan Zemanek at night, he was a shock jock, because Stan would do things to. Did he really say that? That was the whole idea. But Kyle's taken it to a whole new level. He's had to, so he's pushing all of the boundaries. I find what he does actually quite offensive, and I'm not sure how much creativity there is in the whole show. It's built around getting celebrity interviews and giving things away and pushing the envelope, but it's largely a talk show. It's not a music show.
Do you think he can ever work in Melbourne?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so at all. Because I think the FM shows that are there in Melbourne are very strong. There's 4 or 5 really strong FM breakfast shows in Melbourne. There's in the Sydney breakfast shows have been struggling really on a couple of the big FM stations. So there's no reason for the people to tune into them. So I think they're going to be stuck on the 5 or 6% that they've got now, and they'll eventually leave Melbourne with their tail between their legs.
And you can't discount localism in Melbourne. I know Carl thought he could overcome that with the national show, but everything, and I've done a lot of news campaigns for 7 and 9 in Melbourne, and it's always about localism. The more you can showcase localism and local stars in local places, that's what resonates with the audience, and I don't see it being any different with radio.
Yep. There's a long history in Melbourne going all the way back. People who've got long memories remember in the 1980s, Kerry Packer bought 2UE and it was 3AK and decided to set up a networked
Yes.
program between the two of them. He pinched John Blackman from 3AW, put him on the breakfast show on 3AK. He had Mark Day doing drive time in both cities. They stupidly thought they could do a networked sports show. And so 3AW countered that with a huge advertising. I remember newspaper campaigns talking about harbour bridges and talking about keep the Sydney-siders out of Melbourne, and that's always been the case. I think that's what you see, the idea of trying to pump a show from Sydney into Melbourne. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let me ask you, you could argue that talkback stations like 2GB, 3AW, 4BC rely on, they skew to the right. So when you've just had an election where the majority of Australians have overwhelmingly voted for a left-leaning government, does that affect the content and the style of show that talkback stations do?
Well, it's an interesting one because and we talk and talkback itself is an interesting subject because there are some people in the business who erroneously suggest that the 2GB started using text messages instead of using talkback and getting people to talk on the phones. That's just happened organically. Once the text line was set up, people like communicating that way, and the younger people, young people don't even answer the phone. So people feel they've got more power. They can tap out a text message, they can tap out an email, they can curate the words themselves. They do it that way, and that's how they like to communicate. So that's become very much a part of what happens. But in terms of the politics of it, there's an argument that if you've got a government with massive challenges, and no one denies there are massive challenges, then you can be very critical of that government. And I think if you go back over the years, sometimes the highest ratings for what you might call centre-right talkback radio has been when there's a Labor government in, and there's been fierce criticism of that government, often led by those stations. A good example would be after the global financial crisis, the insulation scheme, which was ostensibly a economic stimulus package, but the whole thing fell apart, and it was exposed by Ray Hadley on his morning show because people were just ringing him up and saying, well, this is what's happening. So they decided to try and turbocharge insulation in people's homes. All these businesses were suddenly set up. All these cowboys were in the industry. And every morning you'd hear Ray Hadley getting calls from people. This is what's happening. This is what I know is going on. This is what's going on here. I've found a big dump of insulation's been dumped by the side of the road. And so all the mess of that program was exposed on his radio show. So if things are not going well, they can be exposed on what you might call centre-right radio. I should mention that people would probably regard me as being a centrist. So I've never been one of those. I'm a centrist, and I've managed to survive all these years by doing that, because I think you can actually run radio shows and be critical of both sides and pull things apart. And there's some issues where I would argue if you're not sitting on the fence on some issues, you haven't been paying attention. So I think anyone who says, for instance, that let's take the going to stick our head up on this one. The issue of the Middle East and Israel and Palestine and Gaza. Anyone who'll tell you that one side is right and the other side is wrong, well, they just haven't been paying any attention. Because so that would be my. There's a lot of issues where you've got to say, well, this is what's happening here. This is what's happening here. People can make up their own mind. I think that's the way I've tried to do it over the years, and I've managed to get away with it for a very long time.
You have been a programmer in a former life. You've done everything in radio. 4BC has certainly faced some challenges up here in Queensland. If you were given the reins, what would you be doing? Would you be keeping things as they are, because in the last survey there were some increases, or would you be looking for generational change? What would you be looking at?
Oh, look, I do the night show on 4BC. Our show's on every night, and you're on with me. So, and I don't really want to be. Look, I think I don't know enough about it. I know about our part of the day at night. I know.
Look, it was probably an unfair question. You do work for 2GB and appear on 4BC. So let me ask you this. 2GB went through some massive change into the new year.
Yep.
They lost Ray Hadley. They
Yep.
lost Chris O'Keefe.
Yep.
So it was a nervous time. Is there a sense of relief with Mark Levy winning convincingly? I mean, it's
Yep.
like he's just come in and nothing's changed.
Yep. Well, look, the ratings are as good as they've been for the last 20 years. So if you have a look at it, it was Alan Jones and then Ray Hadley, and then you had Ben Fordham on drive time, and they've pretty well turned over every shift. Since the time I've been doing, I think the nights 5 or 6 years, but in that time, every shift's turned over, including the night shift, and the ratings are as good as they've been for the last 20 years. So people have stayed loyal to the station. So some decisions were made that obviously worked and people liked it. So certainly I'm keen for it to stay for a few more years because I like what I'm doing.
Oh, mate, I don't see you going anywhere. And I've got to say, you are one of the most generous people in the industry I have met. You have certainly taken me under your wing. I get to do an hour with you every Tuesday night at 10 o'clock. But what's been the biggest lesson you've learned in your multi-decade career?
Well, I think you've just got to be yourself, and I think sometimes if you get something wrong, admit it. People appreciate that. If you make a mistake, admit it, and people appreciate that as well. And I think also there's actually a great line out of the fantastic TV show Ted Lasso, which is a line about being curious. I think being curious is really the core to what we do, because if you're curious, and then you are going to look into things and then present things to your listeners. And I think also trying to put yourself in the place of the listener and think, all right, what do they want to hear about this? So when a story comes up or you're interviewing someone, rather than sitting there and thinking, what do I want to hear? Or what's written here in terms of maybe the press release, what do the listeners want to hear from this person? And put yourself into that. Into that. I think that's a really important one. And the other one is just to listen, because quite often, and I think we all see this, you see people on radio and TV who've got themselves a series of questions that they've got in front of them to do an interview. And I think the best way to do an interview is to just listen to what the person says and then respond to what they're saying, rather than just say, I'm going to move to the next question here. And sometimes the best response to what someone's saying is to say, I know people joke about, because I say it a lot, say, really? And that could mean anything. Say, really? And that just gets them to expand a bit on what they've just said. They can say something quite interesting. Oh, really? You don't even need to say, can you say a bit more about that? You just leave a pause. Mike Willesee used to do it. Just go, really? Can you tell us a bit more about that? That's nothing wrong with asking that, because I think people really like to hear a bit more. And
Really?
I just wanted to say one other thing, if I can, Rob. Just what you talk about people on radio, and it's a conversation they're having in politics at the moment. This is this business of women on radio, and there are different views on all of this. And there are those who say that the traditional talkback audience doesn't like listening to women on radio. Now, I wasn't around in the 60s, certainly in the business. I was a little boy growing up, but I was always interested in radio. And 2GB in Sydney was the big talk station in the 60s in Sydney. And three of its biggest stars were called Dita Cobb, Gwen Plum, and Andrea, three women. And if you go back and listen to some of the tapes that exist of those, or the audio, they were phenomenal performers. They were really amazing. So you find the right woman to put on air, and they will take off. And that's been my view all along. I don't think there's a problem with listening to women on air. It's just a matter, you find the right people, and they will rate, and people will want to listen to them.
Very good point to end on, sir. You know I love you. I think you're fantastic, and I really do appreciate you coming on McKnight tonight.
Yeah, okay. On Barnaby Joyce, can I throw more? I think you're wrong.
Please do.
Anyway, that's my view. I think you're wrong.
Of course you do.
But
Most
that's
people
just my
do.
view.
Okay, why should we know about their personal issues? Why are politicians' personal lives off limits when we vote for them based on their values?
If he's got a terminal illness, he's asking you to elect him for 3 years. So I think if he'd come out with it before the election, people would have been saying, "Oh, Barnaby's just using this for I think he would have been in a no-win situation whichever he went. But I think having done this, I think he's taking people along for the ride. I'd be more concerned if we find out that Jacinta Price was already talking about joining the Liberal Party in the week before the election, didn't tell anyone in the Northern Territory when they voted for her. That
See,
I think
have an
might be a more interesting question.
I have an issue with politicians that change parties or leave a party
Oh,
when
yeah.
that party has helped them
Yeah.
be elected. I have a major
Yeah.
issue with that. But on Barnaby, let me ask you, when the Daily Telegraph did that headline, and I think we've got that picture, if Amanda can pull it up, if she can find it again. When the Daily Telegraph did that picture of Vicky Campion pregnant and exposed the fact he was having a baby with his staffer, do you think that was off limits?
I thought the photo of her was off limits. I thought there was no doubt the photo of her was off limits. I thought taking. I don't think there was anything wrong with the story, but I don't like the fact that the photo was taken and published on the front page in that way. It didn't need to be done that way. That was my view on that one. But I think it was a legitimate story. Certainly a legitimate story, I think.
There are a lot of journalists.
There's a whole conversation. Yeah.
There are a lot of journos and politicians who said private lives of politicians should remain private. I can't disagree with that more, because he voted against same-sex marriage because of the sanctity of marriage, and he was having an affair with his staffer.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I don't think there's anything wrong with the story. I found the picture of her published on the front page. I thought that was an intrusion into her privacy. So I think you know who'd be the best person to talk to about that? Vicky Campion. She writes for the Telegraph now every Saturday. I'd love to know what she thinks about that photo appearing on the front page, because I don't think you can argue that having the photo added to the story at all.
You know what? I can probably go with you on the photo. Obviously, having the photo really put it out there. There was the proof in the pudding. But I, to be honest, I can go with you on the photo, but I don't think the story was off limits.
Yeah, it's not illegal. Yeah, I noticed. I don't think the story was off limits at all. But I think, and let's be honest, if you're walking in public, you can take a photo of someone. You're fair game. But I just think under the circumstances, you didn't need the photo. That's my view. I'd love to know what she thinks, though. I guess it's up to her, really. But she's now working for the paper, so maybe she's forgiven them. Or maybe she'd never have a problem with it.
Yeah, a paycheck can do that. Mate, you are a very fair man. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all your support. You are a true legend. Okay. Thank you for joining me on McKnight Tonight.
And we'll review all of this on Tuesday night on my show, when
at
I'll
10
have the
o'clock
upper hand.
on 2GB and 4BC, Nights with John Stanley.
That's right. And can I say it? On at least a couple of things here tonight, McKnight was right.
Yes!
There you go. See? I can't remember what they are, but I'm sure there was something you were right about.
Oh, I will clip that up and I will play it on your show on Tuesday night.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, mate. Thanks a lot. We'll talk soon.
See you, John. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, mate. Bye-bye.
What a legend. What an absolute legend. All right, let's take a look at some feedback coming through to McKnight Tonight. And we've got this from Jason. McKnight Tonight has better production values than Sam Payne Tonight, and a better name, Jason. McKnight Tonight rolls off the tongue. What else have we got there? We've got this one from Justine. I think the unions are clutching at straws to get a win for their members. They don't actually care what they get. They just want to look good, and it's backfiring on them badly. Really good point, Justine, because from a public relations point of view, I think the idea that they want cabins on driverless trains to house their staff is just BS. And those trains just are not built for that. It's not like the old trains with, where you can have a guard cabin. This would cost a lot of money, a lot of money. The sooner we get driverless trains everywhere, the better. Leah says, Robin Blundell said that on Thursday night, she didn't even know it was John in that last hour. He was struggling so much. That's interesting, Leah. So John really was, he should have given me a call. I could have gone on. And we got this one from Jimmy. Great insight with John regarding the radio industry. Thank you, Jimmy. I completely agree. All right. Before we go, I've got time for a back-end quickie. A really quick one tonight. Do you know what this is? It is called the interrobang. And it's what happens when you combine a question mark with an exclamation mark. Have you ever done a text and you said, what was that? And you've done question mark and exclamation mark. Well, believe it or not, it is a real thing that if you put them together, you get the interrobang. And I'm not making this up, it is a very real symbol. And it is actually even being used in a law case, I think it was in the States. And so it is called the interrobang. And you can actually change your iPhone to do special settings that if you, and I do it, let me see if I can do this here. If I type on my notes and I go, here we go, I'll do McKnight. You might need to take camera 2 a minute. And I'll even spell McKnight right. McKnight was right. And I go question mark, exclamation mark. Now, I'm going to try and get it up to the camera. Right? Now, if I hit space, see how it changes it to interrobang? Can you see that? No, that's the interrobang, Amanda. It's a hard symbol to tell. Yeah, that went swimmingly. That's what it turned into. The show was going so well. Luckily, John's gone now, so he's not seeing this part. All right, well, now that brings us to the end of McKnight Tonight. We will be back again at 8 o'clock. Please share this video with your friends. I'll be putting clips up on YouTube. Now, I need your support. Go to YouTube, subscribe to youtube.com/McKnight Tonight. Subscribe. I need to get my counts up so that I can do extra features. But thank you for your company tonight. And I'm going to do a tricky thing here. This is why I'm getting you to go to camera 2, Amanda, because it's good night from McKnight. Yeah, it worked. You can roll the clothes tonight.
McKnight tonight. McKnight tonight. It's good night from McKnight tonight.